Hey everyone, welcome back to FF Squared, where we talk about fantasy football predominantly and sometimes finance.
Mhm.
Um, we're here this week, before 1 week before our NFL regular season. Co-host Jesse Mueller and I,
Hi.
um, we'll be we kind of want to introduce something that we'll be talking throughout the season at the league winners, where we both write for. And I know Jesse is sort of spearheading some of the video content there with the shorts this season, taking that on. And I'm kind of excited to kind of bring this new sort of a new analysis in a different format, I guess, to help the different various fantasy football prospects. Um, so basically, this sort of started. My personal agenda here was to write a little bit more specific to the one and done type leagues, where you need to look at weekly matchups a little bit more.
Mhm.
If you don't know what a one and done league is, check out our uh, content at the league winners. We have a getting to know your series or your fantasy football format article series, and one of them is one and done. So if you don't know what that type of league is, check out the link below, and go learn how, what makes it unique and what makes it exciting. But then, uh, once you start playing one and done leagues, weekly matchups become a huge thing. The one thing that I learned playing one and done leagues was it helped me set my flex spots, or if I'm streaming a position like tight end or quarterback, understanding which streamers to play each week.
Mhm.
Um, and also DFS, right? It's sort of similar to DFS. So understanding, where you might find some sleepers in matchups that you could get for low um, budget on DraftKings or Underdog. Um, sorry, FanDuel.
Yeah.
So that's what we want to talk about here. Jesse, do you want to kind of touch base a little bit about what you're bringing this year?
Yeah. I just did a guillotine series that we're talking about for the league formats, and I think this also hits that too because you don't want to get chopped in week one, right? So it's the same type of aspect. Obviously, it's a little bit different because one and done. It's like you get the player once and they're gone. Like you can't use them the rest of the year. So it's a completely different aspect where you have to build a bit more strategy into who you're going to play, like which week you're going to play McCaffrey or which week you're going to play the sleeper you're talking about. I think that's interesting. But like for me, we're doing a whole bunch of stuff for league winners, so we're doing the sleeper picks because we're partnering with sleeper. So whoop, whoop with that, that's pretty cool. We're gonna be doing picks and like game props and like cover games each week. So I think we're gonna cover up to between like 8 games a week. So it's going to be a lot of games we're going to be going over, and we're going to be doing kind of prop odds and individual players and highlighting that from video, like short form TikTok and Instagram, stuff like that. So it'll be pretty cool to branch into that and see us take off with that because that's something we haven't done before at League Winners. So it's just a new way of looking at it and creating more content for the people to enjoy and hopefully help them, make more money and win their leagues because that's what it's all about, realistically.
Yep. Hopefully, the tool can help you become a league winner. Um,
Yes.
so typically, we've in the past we've kind of taken fantasy football analogies and applied them to finance. Um, this sort of is the other way around. In businesses, especially in very big businesses, they need to control their processes, and see where the anomalies are. A simple thing would be your shipping, right? You're sending something out or receiving supply, and understanding, is your shipping process giving you on time delivery all the time, or is there some variance? And what are some of the outliers, or what are causing the outliers, et cetera, et cetera? Um, so what businesses do, they have analysts who are statisticians and math majors. They apply this principle called control line, and basically you have a process, and that process yields a certain result.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the results, you have a median. And if at any time the process yields results that is some sigma, some standard deviation off of that median process result, it alerts them to say, okay, there's something, what's going on? Was there a huge snowstorm in Chicago that delayed everything or whatnot? Was it, there was a gap in the process that kind of fell through the crack, and they need to fix the process to better implement it or better be prepared for disruptions that could cause their business to shut down. Case in point, COVID, the
Right.
ultimate outlier.
I don't
um,
think anybody accounted for that, but yeah, it's I think it's 100% like when you're putting in your process and you're going through the stuff until you review it and experience it, like you don't know the problems that will occur. You might think it might just be as simple as going to A to B, but there could be some malfunction along those lines, and then you got to account for that and change it because you're losing profit at that point. And so, as a business, like it makes sense to dive into that and find out where you can, kind of trim the fat, they say.
Yeah, exactly. So I actually think this, kind of applying this control line graph to fantasy football could be really big, especially once we start gathering the data that we need. Um, and we're going to start it off by a very simplistic look at it. But I'm hoping to grow it where we're not just checking quarterback matchups, but I want to be also tracking Josh Allen's matchup because compared to all the other quarterbacks, Josh Allen is always going to be a top tier fantasy option.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to see if there are matchups where he's going to underperform. So I wanted to kind of grow this from a team level graph to an individual graph. As the seasons go on, and I get better at obtaining this data and creating a database. But I think that's sort of the long term view is starting it off at the team level and then kind of going down to the each individual player level. So I'm kind of excited to kind of kick this off in 2023. And here's the control line graph, and I kind of give you a simplistic view onto what this is showing. So basically, the blue line is what's called the upper control limit, and the yellow line is what's called the lower control limit. And the way that's calculated basically is all of these green bars, the median falls somewhere around, let's say, 20 points, and then because quarterbacks are they're a very high floor type of position, you kind of see them grouped between 18 and 24 points, and a lot of them are within the 1 sigma of median. So this is a certain percentage of the standard deviation under the median, and this is a certain percentage above the median. And the whole key here is it's supposed to be a very visual indication of who is primed for a good fantasy football matchup and who is maybe not primed for a very good fantasy football matchup. Couple things right off the bat, players like Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes are almost always going to be way above just because their floor is so high.
Yep.
But what I want to use this graph to is look at the other folks, right? Like Tampa Bay. Okay, they seem to have a good matchup. Again, caveat: this is 2022 numbers because we don't have 2023 data yet. And I want to prompt. I want this graph to prompt me to look into that matchup a little bit more, and I did. Right. So in Tampa Bay's case, the reason their number was so high is with Tom Brady, they were passing at 40 attempts a game.
It's absurd.
So volume is key, right? Exactly, and we don't expect that to happen this year. So again, this is not to say that Tampa Bay quarterbacks is going to score the third most fantasy football. It's more they do have a pretty good matchup playing the Vikings, who were also very bad against the quarterback last year. So I know, Jesse, we talked about this graph a little here and there. You don't know what the intricate details of it is inside of it, but at the first glance, I guess, what would your take be on this?
So the really low numbers and the high numbers jump out. So if we're looking at Tennessee, I'm looking at is that Atlanta, I'm looking at Carolina and Chicago, which are just like super low on this graph. Like they're bottom barrel. Like you see those and you're like, ooh, just immediately tells me I want to avoid. Like I don't want to touch the matchup. Like we're gonna move along. And then the ones that jump out, like you have Arizona, you have Kansas City, right? You have the Chargers. So you have kind of these big name quarterbacks associated with those teams. And you're like, well, yeah, it makes sense that those are higher because those are the best quarterbacks in the league, right? So that kind of goes into your process of how you think, like, yeah, it's Patrick Mahomes, like he's going to have a super high floor, or it's Justin Herbert, it's one of the best offenses in the NFL. So you kind of look at it from that perspective, it kind of like hits on what you expect. But some of these matchups, when you go in, you look at it, you're like, oh wow, that's a really bad matchup, and it more catches my because the negative always like sticks with me when I like think about stuff. So those negative, those really bottom ones, I'm just like, oh gosh, like I don't want to touch those games.
So I'll just give a little anecdotal of what are the numbers that kind of go into this. And the numbers for the QB specifically are their pass attempts, their rush attempts. So it's basically volume. Then it's their completed air yards and yards after the catch per reception, plus their rushing yards per attempt. So it's efficiency on the volume they're seeing. And their fantasy points per game. And on the flip side, you have the defense's numbers for those categories as well.
Mm-hmm.
So case in point, Patrick Mahomes. Everyone intuitively thinks Patrick Mahomes is going to be one of the top scoring quarterbacks that week. But if you're playing in a one and done league, you want to pick him where he's going to throw those four to five touchdowns, almost 500 yards. And if you look at his matchup with the Detroit Lions this year, Detroit Lions were the worst defense against quarterbacks. They allowed the most fantasy points to quarterbacks last season. Couple that with Mahomes' floor, hence he's the overall number one in this graph at the moment. It's because the floor is there and the matchup is juicy. Justin Herbert, intuitively people know he's a good quarterback, but last year his median was pretty low. His average was pretty low. This time he's playing the Miami Dolphins, what seems to be a shootout in week one based on 2022 numbers. So that's the reason that he's very high up there. So it is coupling the high floor by looking at their fantasy points per game, their passing attempts and rushing attempts that provides the floor, and then also looking at what the defense is giving up in each one of those categories, right? So if Patrick Mahomes is passing 40 times a game and he's playing a defense that's giving up 38 pass attempts a game, I mean, that's a juicy matchup. And this is what this chart is trying to allude. Right.
It makes sense. I'm curious. The one that stands out, actually, with like speaking of like good fantasy quarterbacks, is Chicago. And I think they're playing Green Bay, if I'm correct, right? But it's Fields and is an insanely high rushing floor, but he's such a bad passer. And these numbers immediately reflect that, right? Because you were talking about the data that goes into it. So it's interesting where people are super bullish on Fields this year. But this graph is like, maybe pop the brakes in week one. Like, let's see what happens, right? So of all the quarterbacks, I'd say he stands out the most just because of how good of a fantasy quarterback he is. But like his the boom bust potential is pretty jarring looking at the chart.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, this graph still needs a little bit of tweaking. And so at the league winners, what our goal is going to be is every week we're going to publish this Wednesday night, Thursday morning, once the stats and everything have been updated from every site. And hopefully it'll give you that view into the matchup at a very visible level. So you hit the nail on the spot. I'll be completely honest. This was a work in progress when I created this image. The latest image is still working. So Chicago Bears, Justin Fields, you caught that perfectly. At this point, when I created this, I hadn't accounted for rushing attempts. Okay. But even then, Justin Fields, after accounting for rushing, he's pretty much at the median level at that point. Once you see the new chart come in out on Wednesday, but that's a great point. You need to look at the matchup. This needs to prompt you to look at the matchup.
Yeah, I think another interesting one is San Francisco with how good their offense is, and it is Purdy's the quarterback. They're playing Pittsburgh, who like they can create havoc with that defense they have. Obviously, a healthy JJ Watt, or sorry, TJ Watt, not JJ. Oh, I'm all over the place. Healthy TJ Watt makes a world of difference for Pittsburgh, so they get him back. So it's kind of interesting where Purdy was on fire at the end of the year. So I think a lot of people are just assuming he's going to just take off from where he was like a top 10 quarterback towards the end of the year. In week one, might not want to play Purdy just because, there could be some problems with the line against Pittsburgh and, things like that. So it's seeing it in a visual form is always nice because certain ones will automatically draw your attention. Obviously, like Mahomes with Detroit, that's as premium as a matchup. It doesn't get any better than that. So if you're going to ride with Mahomes, like this might be the week to do it. Like it's just go, baby. I think the Chargers are one also that one stands out too because that's another barn burner matchup. So it's like those two. And if they had Brady, I would be more interested in Tampa, but like I'm super treacherous. I know the data tells us one thing, but like I'm not trusting Baker Mayfield week one. I don't want to get eliminated week one in that situation. Like we're not going to go that route. So yeah, so it's just like kind of you have to check it if it measures up what you're saying and you go with it, or you choose to like just turn and go a different route.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, this initial week one chart is based on 2022 data, which is incorrect, right? Because there's been free agent movement, there's been draft players picked up, coaching changes, people coming back from injury. All those factor into the numbers that occurred in 2022. So you hit the nail right on the head again, right? Tampa Bay. It seems like a juicy matchup because of what their offense was last year, which was really pass heavy. And they're playing the Vikings, who yielded a lot of passing attempts last year. But again, this isn't like one and done type of situation. This is more look into the matchup a little bit better, especially when you're playing one and done, guillotine, or DFS, right? Like it's an indicator more than a resolution.
Yeah, I
or
think
a
it's
disposition rather.
Going to this can apply to all those formats like you're talking about. So depending on what format you're in, you can kind of tinker it to kind of work with that format because they all kind of hit at a certain point on the same spectrum. They're just a little varying degrees of difference. Obviously, guillotine's the most extreme because you're going home. Like that's no more league after week one if you lose. So that's probably the most extreme one of the three. But like DFS, you just come back week two. One and done, you're still playing. You just don't get to use those players. But it's just all strategy really. So tinker it to whatever your league is and whichever of those three, and then you can kind of go from there which one you want to use. But it's just super helpful to have the data than a visual perspective from a graph than just looking at numbers, right? Because like the visual aspect of a graph is just easier to present and distill it down than it is just looking at numbers, I would say.
Exactly. And then at the league winners, we'll be publishing this for QBs, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends every week. And what I saw from my analysis of 2022, as the season goes on, this chart's correlation gets higher and higher. Obviously, it's not 100% because you can't account for injury or someone dealing with injury or weather or whatnot. So again, it's an indicator. But the way I plan on using this is, I'm going to be writing about, who people to target in your flex spot using this chart and the consistency rating at Big Guy Fantasy. Also, tight end streaming options, quarterback streaming options. Kind of look into those matchups. Say, okay, this matchup, maybe Baker Mayfield does have a pretty good matchup and he's proven that in good matchups he can play. So those type of articles.
I'd also hit on the people that have kind of pushed like the zero RB strategy. Like this may be a useful tool to use in that team because like you're dealing with a lot of lower level running backs, but if the running back that has the best matchup, like that's the one you'll probably go target. So like I think this type of data is really helpful for people who have built those teams and are like, all right, I don't know which running back to play this week. It's like, oh yeah, maybe it's like Herbert in this matchup or whatever, right? You use that guy and you're like, it's a boom matchup. So it's like use that and take it to your advantage. Like, it can actually help you play well.
Exactly. So, Jesse, I know you're sort of spearheading this whole sleeper picks video content in the league winners. How would you use this chart to, help you pick the player props sleeper pick.
So
matchup.
I would, depending on the yardage output for someone like Godwin or Evans with Tampa Bay, I'm going to target one of those guys just because of who they're playing. And like this basically is like looking at it as an expected output is the way I'm looking at it. Like, all right, this is what the program's kind of assuming you're going to hit. So whoever has a juicy matchup, and then I would break it down like, all right, who's they going up against? Like, does the defense play out in Tampa Bay specifically? If they're playing a little bit more zone, then I'll go with Godwin. If they play more man, then I'll go with Evans because that's Evans' specialty. So I'll like use this as part of my process where then I'll break it down a little bit further. And it's just like another feather in your cap where like, all right, I have this info, combine it with the other info, and then that's how I'm going to about using that process. Or case in point, like I'll just take the best player on the Chargers in this matchup, like Keenan Allen. Like, yeah, Keenan Allen's gonna cook. So like we'll just immediately, like, since it's such a good matchup for the quarterback Herbert, I'll go to Keenan Allen and then all the information we've had about how involved he's been in the offense, like with more coming over to like changing the offense a little bit. Like I expect Keenan Allen to be fully involved, so I know his prop line's gonna be kind of high, but like this just forces my hand even more. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna bet the over on his yardage, his reception, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Even if it's a high prop bet, you can use this type of matchup visual to say, okay, maybe the matchup is there for a high and him to come in over. Or on the flip side, it could be, you see this and be like, okay, I feel like, Tony Pollard might not have the best running back matchup. He might go on the underside. So again, like you said, you can use this chart for various formats of fantasy football, and targeting you exactly where you need to target that. Again, I can't emphasize enough, especially early in the season, this chart's not going to correlate perfectly. It's going to take time as the season goes on to kind of build that confidence level in the data. But again, this should be a quick visual indicator for you to go check out that matchup. You're obviously playing your studs. This is more for, if you're trying to figure out who's going to be playing in your flex spot, take a look at this chart and use it to deep diver into the players you're comparing.
Absolutely. I think it's beneficial, like this type of information, especially early on. Like you don't know how it's going to go because there is such mystery with like a lot of changes, new schemes, like new defense coordinator job, like all this stuff is in shift and in flux. So, use it and pay attention to it. Like for real, if I'm looking at Atlanta, like that just scares me even more about Pitts in London, right? So it's like, maybe I don't target them in my sleeper picks in week 1, It's like, let's push it out a little bit, see how it works out and go from there. But yeah, it's like, I like it. It's a useful tool, like 100%.
Yeah, well, so we're hoping, this chart comes in help for you guys in 2023 in your fantasy football, be it DFS, one and done, sleeper picks, or even in redraft, just setting your flex positions or streaming at quarterback. But we're kind of excited to kind of, showcase this charts and kind of write about it and diving into the data through the articles and suggesting the league winners for the weeks throughout the NFL season. So kind of excited project here at the League Winners. We're kind of undertaking combined with our affiliation with Sleeper Picks. So look for, the first set of charts to drop on Thursday.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun data to dive into. And I'm excited to take a look at it because I'm like, it's the first time seeing it. So, me, I'll like, ooh, what is this? And I'll dive in more. So I'm excited to see it drop Thursday.
Yep. Well, so stay tuned. Make sure you follow us at the League Winners and at FF Squared TLW on Twitter. We'll definitely put the link to where this charts will reside as they become available. So definitely check out the descriptions. And like I said, every Thursday they'll be live on the League Winners website. Cool. Talk to you guys later.
All right. Take care, folks.
This podcast is sponsored by The League Winners. Check them out at theleaguewinners.com.